Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 68th episode of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com and me, Tommy Bateman, counselor extraordinaire in the Richmond, Virginia area. Michael is obviously in San Francisco, but you'll find that out at 3minutetherapy.com. Today, we have something pretty special. Let me just let Michael tell you. Michael, what's up today?
Okay, we have a special guest today, my good friend and professional colleague, Dr. Marty Nemko, is going to give us his sharp critique of REBT, and we'll see if we can come up with some responses. And Marty Nemko has many accomplishments. I'll try to keep it brief. Marty has written probably 10 to 15 books, How to Do Life, Careers for Dummies, many more. He's written way over 1,000 now, Psychology Today blogs. He has many YouTube talks. He has a weekly radio show, which you can get at his website, martynemko.com, if you're not in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that's just a start, but I'll end there. So Tommy, do you want to explain to the audience briefly what REBT is? And then I'll explain what REBT is not, and then Marty will have a go at us.
Okay, so I'm going to give it a go. Probably going to butcher it, but here we go. So this is just something that Marty and us can jive off of. So REBT, something developed in 1955 by Dr. Albert Ellis as a reaction to the psychoanalytical psychology theories that we had from Freud and Jung and all that stuff before, right? Wasn't too working. It was inefficient. Dr. Ellis said, I can do something better. And sure enough, he did. The philosophical harkenings kind of date back to the ancient Stoics, but in brief, what it is based on this philosophy. You don't merely get upset, but mainly upset yourself by holding on to irrational, inflexible, untrue beliefs. And the longer you stay upset is only because you're holding on to those untrue, unpractical, inflexible, irrational beliefs. And the only way to get better is to practice more rational beliefs. Through that, we've developed something called the ABC. We didn't develop it. It was all Dr. Ellis. ABC. A is the activating event. You have no control over the activating event because it's already happened. B, the belief, is what you think of the activating event. And C, the emotion, is what happens once we go from A through B to C. Now, most people make the mistake and think the activating event is what causes the emotion. That's not true, because you can have many different reactions to winning the lottery, and you have many different reactions to being pinched on the butt. That is why we have the B in the middle. So the aim of REBT is to address irrational Bs through disputing and coming up with more rational thinking with new effective feeling thereafter. I think that's enough to sum it up today. Michael, what is it not?
Okay, well, some things REBT is not, which intuitively it may seem it is number one, it's not an immediate cure or silver bullet, not one trial learning. It takes work and practice. It's not superficial. It involves developing a new perspective, a new profound philosophy of life, although there are simple methods to do it. It doesn't exclude ancillary approaches. Tommy gave the main core, but it's really comprehensive. It includes lots of other kinds of practical and emotional, behavioral, and emotive strategies. It is not an end in itself. It teaches clients how to achieve their own values and objectives. We don't tell them what they should believe in terms of what's good in life. And it's a means of teaching the scientific method. So it's a methodology rather than an end state. It's culture-free. It's not culture-bound. It's not liberal or conservative or African or French. It's just a method to achieve whatever your goals happen to be. It's not categorically opposed to discussing childhood or other influences on your emotional disturbance, although we mainly focus, as Tommy has pointed out, on irrational beliefs, and it does not ignore practical problems. Okay, Marty,
Why are we wrong?
What are some of your critiques of this?
Well, I'm delighted. It's more entertaining to just violently disagree, but I've noted with interest your presentation as being quite different than what I've heard you say before. You've acknowledged the importance of eclecticism, from bringing up childhood issues to the fact that it's a philosophy of life, though that makes it a much harder target. What I've been very concerned about when you've discussed it before is that too much of the time is spent on that one solution. That your erroneous thinking, as Tommy would say, that if we only correct it with practice often enough, you can correct your erroneous thinking. And that while that is a useful tool, as we ever know more, that much of who we are is at least initially mediated by our genetics and by, to a secondary extent, by our early upbringing. It requires a lot more tools in our armamentarium than just A, B's, and C's to look at where your incorrect thinking is, and getting yourself to have a philosophy of, not, one of the core things you've always said is, you don't have any musts, you and shoulds, you have preferences and wants. That's a nice technique. It's helpful. But I think that my core objection was to your earlier presentation about what REBT is, which was predominantly that A, B's, and C's that Tommy said. In my mind, the wisest counselor has a humility to recognize that at this stage of psychotherapy, it's in its adolescence, or at best, maybe even childhood, and that it requires a well-rounded toolkit to pull the right tool at the right time for the right person.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think your criticism is somewhat valid in that in REBT, we see the core as helping people get over their demands, their musts and shoulds, and not escalating their preferences into demands. So it could be with some clients, probably more too many clients than you would prefer, I spend time on that one thing. Why musts are false, what your musts are, how to get over your musts, the importance of doing it, and the importance of practice, those kinds of things. So I think if you saw me practicing, you would probably say, well, with this client, you're spending too much time on this core thing, and you would spend more time on more ancillary kinds of things. So it might be a matter of taste or a matter of clinical intuition, how much time I would spend on it, and you versus how you would spend on it with particular clients. Does that sound fair?
No, I wouldn't say it's a matter of taste, or I think it's a matter of recognizing that, and I think, what I'm going to do? I think I want to be specific. And I'm going to not cherry pick here. I'm going to take the areas that you cover in your book, primarily your book 3, Book Therapy. That is depression, addictions, anxiety, right? Your core things. Well, let's take addictions because it's so concrete. It's a little easier to address. We all know, and this is where you and I, Michael, disagree violently, that, for example, tobacco. The model of REBT basically says, as long as you realize that you have it within your control, you make a choice, you really can choose to stop smoking, and while theoretically that's possible, it is for humankind, not the extremely compulsive, detail-oriented person. That choice is, in practical terms, highly unlikely to be made. And the normal human being, you can tell them to write A, B's, and C's all day about musts and shoulds and preferences and wants and irrational thinking. And the reality is many people, every study after study, the marshmallow study, that people will choose one marshmallow now rather than 2 marshmallows later, $1 now rather than $3 later. People are unable, in practical terms, to control themselves. So if we want to optimize our chances with most people to try to help reduce their addictions, we need to understand all of those ingredients. What made them start? What is really his resistance to stopping? To what extent what are the things that motivate that person? Is it going to be they want to live for their children? Is it that their fear of the torture of end-stage cancer? Everything, it feels like, as I said, psychology and psychotherapy is in its childhood, and therefore we must have the humility to recognize that no one technique, certainly not psychodynamic therapy or Jungian, no, but no one technique is likely to be useful enough in enough situations to label oneself, I am an REBT therapist. I may be an REBT therapist who uses REBT as appropriate, but one, humility and fair-mindedness about the data requires eclecticism.
Okay, very good. Tommy, did you want to chime in?
Well, he had so many thoughts that came to my mind. Of course, from the beginning, his initial critique saying, we need to be multimodal in many ways. Of course, I think REBT is a multimodal thing. But moreover, a lot of times when we critique things like DBT, I remember when we critique DBT, we're saying like, one of the things it doesn't have is a core philosophy, but here are some useful things about it. It has some useful techniques. It's really good at mitigating some self-harming and some dangerous, risky behavior. But I'm wondering what if the crux of our disagreement isn't is more in line with do we agree about where emotions come from? Now I work in addictions. That's been my specialty for the past few years, yeah. So I'm saying that. Excuse me. Let's just go back to the crux. Are we in disagreement of where emotions come from? Which from us, it's through the belief, what we think about our situation.
Emotions and behavior, is that right?
Yeah, sure.
I think it's more multivariate than that. There's been studies that show there's tremendous genetic differences in impulsivity. Mm-hmm. It's not a belief issue, but there are some people who are able to think of long-term benefit, and they say, if I do crack, it's going to screw with my mind. If I vape weed, it's going to long-term hurt my memory. But many, many people, especially the kind that have a problem, are coming to you because they have a physiological predisposition. And you can change their attitudes all you want, and their thinking and their degree of control. And I feel it's not likely to solve the problem fully. I think we need to recognize that some people need purely behavioral solutions. Other people need erroneous thinking solutions. Other people need pharmacological solutions. For example, a drug that takes away their desire to do heroin. Or a drug, or looking, sometimes a person, could be one more example of a completely different approach to it. Sometimes people do drugs or get pregnant, or because they feel their life is hopeless. They lack intelligence. Genetically and environmentally caused. They look at their past 15 years and they see they do shitty in school. They may be ugly. They may have an obnoxious personality like me. And so they look at the overall package and they say, the risk reward to my life is nothing. I might as well get high. That way I'll have great sex. I'll get to eat extra pizza with cheese. Who gives a shit if I get fat? So there is, I think, the core of our difference is that there is not one cause of addiction or depression. As we all know, we're seeing more in depression. How much is a physiological predisposition? ADHD, there are physiological differences in the brain. And we need to understand that sometimes what's needed is, and there's something that REBT likes, is acceptance. Sometimes really in the end, we need to accept, you know what? I'm addictive. The best I'm going to do is moderation. I am prone to depression. I'm going to just live with it and accept it. That very often is a technique is that if ABC isn't trying to change, sometimes, as Michael and I have discussed privately, acceptance is often the most realistic and wise goal.
It sounds like we're inserting a bit of a should into REBT that may not exist. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marty, but REBT is silent on whether or not you should or should not use drugs, or should moderate or shouldn't moderate, or be fat or not fat. REBT seems to be, what is your personal goal, and let's pursue it. But it seems to me that REBT in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, is being characterized as saying, well, the goal of REBT is to get you to stop using drugs completely, which is not. It's whatever the goal of the client is. Michael, am I making sense there at all? Because I have no confidence in what I'm saying.
Well, no, I agree with you, but I would like to get back to your former point, which I think is the crux of the matter, getting back to first principles. Where do emotions and behaviors come from? And and Marty, in response, you gave a lot of what we call influences. Genetics influence your decisions and your thinking, and current situations influence your decisions. But what we REBTers are saying is these are influences, but the immediate cause is your thinking And no matter what the influences are, if you change your current thinking, your behavior will change. So the first issue is, do you agree with that, differentiating between influences versus what you're telling yourself in the moment, what you believe, what your philosophy is in the moment that causes your emotions and behaviors?
Yes, but that implies, again, we come back to that issue that you have a great deal of control over what you do with that thinking. If you're saying, I think I should stop smoking. And by the way, people are coming to you for therapy around drugs. It's not to keep doing drugs, usually because they want to moderate or stop. So, while the methodology may not insist, it may be value neutral, I agree. But in reality, people come to you because they want to moderate or stop their drug use, and what we're talking about, right? And so to argue that in REBT, all you need to do is change your thinking, not just, the influencers matter. They matter enormously in terms of the probability of your success. So sometimes simply attacking the erroneous thinking can help. But sometimes you've got to attack the genetic predisposition. Sometimes you've got to talk about what if your father said you were stupid all the time and that you dream you're doomed to failure, sometimes you may need to talk about the childhood stuff. Sometimes you may have a career problem. You've chosen the wrong career, and so you're overgeneral. There's so many facets that need to be taken into consideration. As you, Michael, know very well, somebody you know very well, despite knowing the dangers of smoking, even though she had taken every REBT treatment known to man, practiced with ABCs, Ds, and Es forever, and yet she wouldn't stop until she got end-stage cancer.
Yeah.
There are factors operative.
That's really not the case. You're talking about my wife, and don't talk about my wife like that. But it's not the case. She didn't do 3-minute exercises. She never took REBT that seriously.
I'm sorry.
And by the way, the reason she gave up smoking was a brain stroke, led her to change her thinking about it. It was one trial learning, but the way you're characterizing REBT, Marty, is what I said REBT is not. It's not a superficial, simple solution. You just change your thinking. It's bad to smoke or it'll give you lung cancer. You change your thinking and stop smoking. It's developing a profound philosophy, which takes hard work and practice and reinforcement, giving up your musts and shoulds. So I think that's the issue. Let me give you an analogy. Different people have different talents for language. Yet, just about anyone with an IQ of 100 or above, if they practiced a foreign language, French, say, on a regular basis, some practice more and some practice less, but if they did it on a regular basis, eventually they'd be able to speak French to some extent and go to Paris and ask in French, where is the bathroom? So even if some people are more prone to the I can'ts and more convinced of the I can'ts than others, it's still their thinking, and still with practice and reinforcement, I believe people are able to change their thinking. And I've seen that in many cases.
I think that proves my point. Somebody who doesn't have an aptitude for language, yes, could get, with a lot of practice and a lot of effort, which was a big assumption that they would have the persistence, and they would only reap small benefit relative to the opportunity cost. So looking at aptitudes and abilities, strengths and weaknesses may be more important than saying, you got to practice. If you practice enough, you'll do it. It feels wrong.
Well, and sometimes, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Marty, but what I have done in the past with some of my opiate addicted clients is said, let's do some methadone maintenance and do some replacement therapy until, so you stop doing the dangerous behavior, which is injecting with needles or anything like that, and then slowly taper down on the methadone, then facing that uncomfortable activating event of I'm feeling a little bit more cravings, or I'm feeling a little bit of withdrawal. Now what do I do? But now they have a little bit more aptitude because they have a little bit of methadone in them to help them out, get over that hump of practicing this new belief until it becomes a habitual new thought. Does that make sense?
Well, let's agree. Absolutely. That's why people very often will take an antidepressant, not because it's the cure-all, but it provides just enough, takes enough of the edge off the depression for them to use behavioral and other strategies to improve.
I'm not against that at all. Yeah.
Right. I know. I'm just saying, I'm pointing out, and I'm not always just arguing, I'm pointing out that area of agreement. I also want to talk about the area of agreement about the philosophy, which Michael, you've mentioned 3 or 4 times. I absolutely agree that Epictetus type of stoicism is an invaluable tool to add to one's toolkit. No one is saying that it is not wise to often realize, to, you know, what the Christians would say, grant me the wisdom to know what I can and can't change, and if I can't, to try to stand back and observe, and rather than say, I must fix this, I have to fix it. It's certainly an appropriate approach to life that's a very useful toolkit. Our difference here is that the percentage of time, it's not a matter of taste or therapist taste. I think it's in terms of a matter of what the data shows, in not the data that's promulgated by the creators of a given therapy, because there are creators of therapy who says, all you need to do is say, I believe in myself, I'm fabulous, I can, if I just power pose, I'll be amazing. We don't want to trust that. We want to trust the independent research on efficacy. And a fair, clear-eyed look at efficacy suggests that there is no one method, whether it be psychodynamic or object relations or phenomenological or REBT, that is good enough that it should be the centerpiece of any practice. It should be absolutely an important, but not overwhelming component of any good counselor, therapist, etc.
Well, when you say there's no one method, I agree, Marty. If what you mean by that, there's no one method that everyone will use to change their thinking. But the one thing that's common to all of us is our thinking creates our behaviors and our emotions. So I know people who claim that they were helped by psychoanalysis, but the reason they were helped is because there was something in that psychoanalysis that they took away from that psychoanalysis that led them to change their thinking. And what REBT does is work directly on a particular type of disturbed thinking, the musts and shoulds that underlies a lot of the cognitive distortions that the CBT therapists talk about to help them change. But Tommy brings up a good point, and you agree with it, Marty, that with some people, maybe trying to get them to write out 3-minute exercises every day is not the way to go because they're not going to do it. But then you look at other ways to help them change their thinking, like medication or giving their wife their credit card so they can buy alcohol or things like that. So again, REBT is a comprehensive approach, and we look at these other methods along with the core backbone of REBT, which is identifying your demands and changing those.
Well, to the extent to which you acknowledge full eclecticism, including childhood-rooted stuff, we have no disagreement. I think if you're talking about, once you're saying it's all about, correcting your incorrect thinking, and that's done in psychodynamic therapy or whatever, then we're really talking about then we've expanded the definition of what therapy is so broadly that there's nothing to disagree with. You're just changing people's thinking about it, whatever. And that would allow everything from using, now for PTSD, they're using micro and major doses of hallucinogens. That's changing their thinking too. But right, once you're saying that that's a definition, then we're not really having a debate about REBT. We're just saying, sure, try anything.
Oh, well, let me try to narrow it down then.
Yeah, right.
Changing our thinking is the means of therapy and means of getting us to healthier behaviors and emotions. But I think where Michael and I may land, and I'm not going to speak for you, Michael, but I kind of am, is what is the most effective means of changing that thinking? What is the one that targets it the fastest and targets it the most efficiently? And we would say REBT. That doesn't exclude using things like LSD to stop the physiological reaction to stress, or antidepressants to stop that natural mood, genetic mood that you have. But rather, how do we target that thinking fastest? We would say REBT in a heartbeat.
With most people, most of the time. But I think, Marty, if we look at what you and I think is a good approach, they overlap to a great extent. And I think the main difference is emphasis, how much we emphasize these different
Exactly. That's where we started. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, with some of my clients, what's required we haven't talked about is simply highly rigorous, rational problem solving. So I have a client, this is top of mind. This guy, he's got a PhD from the University of California, and yet he has struggled his whole life with focus. He gets distracted so easily, he cannot focus. And while he's tried everything under the sun, from behavioral therapies, cognitive therapies, drugs, childhood-rooted explanations, in the end, he just can't. So what did we do? I said, let's get to the moment of truth. What is that moment right now? You say you want to clean, you say you can't do a good job of looking for a job if your room is so messy you feel embarrassed by yourself. I say, first of all, do you believe that's an excuse or it's true? He really believes it's true. Fine. So we accept it for the moment. I say, okay, let's take a minute right now. What's the one little part of your room that you want to try to clean right now? And let's experience that moment. And so he's at the corner of my desk. Great. I set a timer for 60 seconds and I said, do it. And then tell me what you're feeling throughout. And then and then at the end he says, oh, what's really going on is what I need is, as long as it's only a 1 minute task, if I don't feel like it's overwhelming, and if it just takes 1 minute, then I can do it. That's not changing his thinking. It's highly rational, focusing on what behaviorally, what tactically, what rationally is the next step. So that's why I'm saying that, yes, it's definitely a matter of emphasis, but to say in a heartbeat, correct your erroneous thinking using REBT, that's where our core difference is.
Right. Okay, well, let me give you the last word because we're running out of time here. But I want to thank you, Marty, for engaging with us. I think this was a very productive, interesting discussion. And there's more to say. I'm sure Tommy and I do have responses to what you just said, but we are time limited. Marty, is there anything else you'd like the viewers to know about you that I didn't mention at the beginning?
Well, I have an addiction, and it is to work. And so, I'm fortunate that I'm not money driven. I put everything out there for free that is about practical approaches normally to improving your life, mainly career, but also everything from, should you marry this person to, if you're not that social, how do you deal with the social world? So I invite people to probably the easiest thing to do would be just Google me. And you'll find videos. I really like my videos because some of them are just really spontaneous and they're human, rather than a scripted thing. Yeah, so my name is spelled Marty, Nemko.
Excellent. And I really enjoy. Thank you again for coming on. And guys, check out that video he has that Marty talks about the usefulness or is college worth it? Is pretty much it. What was that title? I think he had like 500,000 views on that one alone.
America's most overrated product, higher education.
Yeah, it's fantastic, guys. As someone that's speaking with multiple higher graduate degrees, whatever, I loved every second of it. So that was wonderful, guys. Go over to his channel and check that out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's been a great honor having you with us, Dr. Marty Nemko. And viewers, please comment below, ask questions, disagree, and give us a like. And subscribe to the REBT Advocates to stay on the rational side of life.